Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel, Taylor Talks Tales. Today I have a video for you. It is a combo video of my June TBR and a giant book haul. So, I typically don't buy these many books all around the same time, but because my library is still closed and I'm getting low on reading material, I just went ahead and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna treat myself. And I have been saving a lot of money, not really driving anywhere, so I kind of used money I would have normally used for gas and other stuff and then put it towards books because books are my favorite thing to buy anyway. So I have a ton of books to show you. Let's get into it. All of these books I purchased except for two I already had on hand, and I'll point those out to you. And I tried my best to support independent booksellers, used bookstores, you know, trying to help people out as much as I can, fellow book people, you name it. A couple of them did come from Amazon just because they were either the cheapest or easiest option, but for the most part I tried my best to support people where I could. So let's get into it. I would say the vast majority of the books on this list are going to be horror, thrillers with a couple fantasy books in here. So if you're one of my fans of horror, there are a lot of fun treats for you guys to check out. So let's get into it before this video gets way too long. Okay, so to start off with, I'm going to show you the three novellas I have for this month. So we have Out Behind the Barn by John Bowden and Chad Lutzke. We have The Pale White by Chad Lutzke. And we have To Be Devoured by Sarah Tantlinger. So these two I have already read, just because we're a few days into June at this point. This one, I'm going to read the back to you because I don't want you guys to get spoiled if I start talking about it, because I think going into this book as blind as you can go is awesome. So, back says, "The boys crept to the window and watched as Miss Maggie carried the long bundle into the barn, the weight of it stooping her aging back. Rafter light spilled from the barn doors, and Davy saw an arm fall from the canvas-wrapped parcel. He smiled. She got someone! Both children grinned and settled into their beds, eyes fixed to the ceiling. This was family growth." Yeah, so this one was very cool. I will go more in details in my wrap-up at the end of the month, but this was a very enjoyable one. And then this one is about three girls. They are living in a house together. They unfortunately are being trafficked for sex, and they're all underage, and they all have their quirks, and they're very compelling characters, and they start planning their escape by killing the man who has them basically trapped in the house. And it's very enjoyable. I will say trigger warnings galore though, because of the subject matter. All three of these kids, they're 17 and younger. One of them is 9. So it's a dark story, but the ending was so beautiful, and I definitely think you guys should check this one out. Really enjoyed it. And then this is the one novella I haven't read yet, but it sounds awesome. This is the next book I'm going to be starting as soon as I finish the one I'm currently reading. This one is about a woman named Andy who becomes obsessed with wanting to eat carrion. She becomes obsessed with vultures and just wanting to feast on dead flesh. She's just obsessed. She goes to a therapist and tries to work with a therapist, but the therapy doesn't really go anywhere, and things start to escalate from there, and everybody starts getting concerned for her. But what's going to happen? Is she going to start killing people? I'm not sure. I haven't read this one yet, but I've heard it's really dark and messed up. Like, some people I follow who are really into like dark horror and pretty extreme stuff were talking about how much they love this, so I have high hopes for it. I'm very excited and can't wait to get into it. Alright, next one is also a book I have already read, and that is Ferocious by Jeff Strand, which we've got a fun zombie bear on there. And I also do want to point out we've got a little zombie squirrel on the back. This story was a very fun story about a man and his niece. They live pretty much in the middle of nowhere in the mountains, surrounded by forest. They're about 15 miles from the nearest little town, and they kind of keep to themselves. They are super into woodworking, and one day there's a weird squirrel, and they realize this squirrel is trying to attack them by the outhouse, and something's not right with this squirrel, and things escalate from there. And it turns out that the whole forest is just chock full of zombie animals. So it's their fight for survival as they try to escape and get to their truck and try to get some help. There are a ton of zombie critters in this. This book is chock full of action, and it's very enjoyable, and there are some very funny little lines in here and funny scenes, so definitely can't wait to do a review on that, but it's ferocious. By Jeff Strand. Next book I got, White Pines by Gemma Amor. If you saw my video I uploaded a couple days ago about what I read in May, I read her book, or her novella, Dear Laura, and really enjoyed it. This is her first full-length novel, I believe, because she's published novellas and like a short story collection, but I think this is her full-length novel, the first one she's done, and I can't wait for it. I am going to read the back because there's a line that you guys, it just spoke to me. Alright, so yeah. A woman returning to her roots, a town built on sacred land, a secret cloaked in tradition and lore. Welcome to White Pines. Don't get too comfortable. This is the new cosmic folk Celtic cult fantasy horror novel from Gemma Amor, the Bram Stoker Award-nominated author of Dear Laura and Cruel Works of Nature. So, right there. Cosmic folk Celtic cult fantasy horror. Just, this book was made for me because I like all of those things and it's all combined into one. So I ended up reading this and I enjoyed it. I will be doing a full review of it at some point. I also do want to point out that this cover was designed by Keelan Patrick Burke. The man is everywhere in horror and I love him for that. I enjoy his work and his covers are really well done. So this one is an awesome one. Next one, we're getting through the books I've already read and then we'll be getting into the books I haven't read yet, but this is Slowly We Rot by Brian Smith, which this is such a cool cover and it's just like one of those like buttery soft books. This one, it even says on the back, a novel about the zombie apocalypse that's not about the zombies, and it's very true. So this book, it takes place about 7 years or so after the zombie apocalypse happened. We're following a gentleman named Noah. He's in, I'm guessing he's probably mid to late 20s, so he's probably close to my age. And he has been alone in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee for like 5 or 6 years at this point. His mother had succumbed to the infection early on, and his father and sister ended up, they got off the mountain because his sister was like coughing up blood and they just never came home. So he has no idea what happened, and so he's just been living in this cabin by himself, and he has things pretty squared away. He's a bit suicidal at times and he gets a little sad, but for the most part he just kind of chugs along, and he has food, he has water, he has shelter, and the zombies, the way they work in the story is they like slowly deteriorate over time, so at this point it's not a threat. And then he discovers his sister's alive, and she is very angry because she blames him. She thinks he should have gone and saved her because she ended up trapped in this guy's basement for many years and was being tortured and assaulted and all of that. So he ends up, after a fight, she basically kicks him out of their property, and he's very conflicted about the whole thing. And he decides to go track down this girl he loved in college. She lives all the way in California, so he ends up going on this journey, and it goes from there. And this book, I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about. It was very solid, and it really is, there's a lot of action and there's a lot of stuff going on, and I think it's going to be a really good book to talk about, but it definitely, you know, zombies are in it, but the focus is really on the characters, especially Noah and his descent into addiction and his demons. So this one was a very enjoyable one. Alright, next one I picked up, we have The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. This is a thriller and mystery story with some supernatural elements to it. It's told in a dual timeline. So we have 1982, where we have a woman named Viv Delaney. She leaves home. She's 20 years old. She's just kind of done living with her family because she doesn't get along with her mom. And she ends up working in this town called Fell. It's in like upstate New York, and she works at the Sundown Motel, and weird stuff happens, and then there's some unsolved murders, and she decides she wants to solve the murders. Fast forward to 2017, and you have her niece, Carly, Carly's mother had just recently died, and her mother was grieving for her lost sister because Viv ended up disappearing 35 years before, and nobody ever knew what happened. So Carly decides that she's going to go and try to solve the mystery of what happened to her aunt. So she goes gets a job at the Sundown Motel, and then things go from there. And there's murder, there are ghosts, there's all kinds of fun stuff, and overall enjoyable. But if you are somebody who doesn't like supernatural stuff in thrillers, I will say it does play a role in this, so just so you know. Alright, this is the one I'm currently on, which is Scavenger Hunt by Michael Brent Collins. This one, if you like Saw, this book is basically kind of like Saw, but with a scavenger hunt. These 5 strangers wake up in this all-white room, and they have collars on their necks, and they have like these weird Apple watches on their wrist. And there's this guy named Mr. Dogood who has like a smiley face covered in blood, who's giving them instructions to this iPad on the wall, and basically he gives them instructions on what to do in a scavenger hunt. Everybody has to stick together, they have to do these things, and then the stakes keep getting raised higher, 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 and if they don't do what he says, he's going to blow up the collar, and it's going to blow up their head, and it's pretty much doing the scavenger hunt, but also kind of getting a background on the characters and finding out how they may be connected, and also if there's a way to beat Mr. Dogood and why is he doing what he's doing. So I enjoyed Terminal. I read it last month, even though it was 3 out of 5 stars. It was still a very enjoyable, really cool concept book, and so far this one has been also a very cool concept, very interesting story. Alright, now into the books I haven't started yet. We have The Siberian Incident by Greg Beck. So, just look at this cover right here. What does that make you think of? For me, right away it was The Thing. The Thing is one of my all-time favorite movies. I love that movie. I've seen it just probably well over 100 times at this point because I obsessively watch movies. This one sounds really cool. Basically, there's this lake in Siberia that 100,000 years ago something had fallen in the lake, and there's a lot of folklore surrounding it. There's just mutated animals, disappearances, a lot of weird stuff going on, and this guy ends up deciding, oh, I want to have, I think it's a fisher, yeah, it's a sturgeon fish farm on this lake, and he's like, oh, this will be great, I'm gonna have my fish farm, and he doesn't listen to all the locals saying, no, there's something very wrong with this place, and it takes seeing mutated animals and a bunch of other weird crud going on to all of a sudden make him start thinking, wait a minute, what's going on? And people go missing, and yeah, I'm excited for this alien horror. It even says on the back, a tale of alien horror, so if it has anything to do with The Thing or just reminds me of The Thing, I'm down for it, so I think this will be a lot of fun, and I've been waiting and wanting a good alien horror story, so this one hopefully will scratch that itch. Of course, if that one doesn't, I have another alien-themed horror book, and that is Bent Heavens by Daniel Kraus. So, if you watched my coming-of-age horror book recommendations video, Daniel Kraus wrote Rotters, which I really enjoyed that story. I really thought it was just impressive how he wrote that and kind of challenged certain boundaries in YA, I would say, because it's a very dark and gruesome book at times. And this is a alien book. I don't know if he's written other stuff. I think there's like 2 other books of his I've been interested in reading, but this one just caught my eye, not only because of the cover, but it just sounds really neat. Essentially, we're following a girl. Her father disappeared 2 years ago, and her father was obsessed with aliens and was convinced he could catch an alien. And so she's dealing with his disappearance, and she has been checking her father's traps because he used to set these traps in the forest trying to catch an alien. And so she and her friend, one of the last times they're going to go, because she's a senior in high school now, and she thinks, well, you know what, this is kind of silly, I'm going to stop doing this, I need to, you know, heal and get past my grief, all that stuff. And then they discover there's an alien in the trap. And it goes from there, and they have to decide what they're going to do. Are they going to turn the alien in? Are they going to try to get information from the alien? Are they going to take care of the alien? There's a lot going on. And I haven't heard too much about this book because it just recently came out, but I think it should be pretty fun, and if it's anything like the style of Rotters was, I think I'm in for a good treat, so hopefully this will be a fun one. Next up, we have Dead Girl Blues by David Sodergren. So, David Sodergren wrote The Forgotten Island and Night Shoot, 2 books I've read in the last couple months. really enjoyed both of them, especially Forgotten Island was fantastic. And this one sounds awesome as well. Essentially, there's another woman who dies in her arms, and after that event happens, she's thrust into the world of snuff films. So she's trying to solve the murder mystery and also try to protect herself and just puzzle through what's happening. And even on the back of this, it says part noir mystery, part violent slasher, and it involves lots of dead people and snuff films, and I think that's going to be very cool. And David Sodergren, he's a self-proclaimed horror fan, and I feel like it really comes through in his books, and he writes horror books for horror fans, so I'm really looking forward to this. This is his newest release. Speaking of other books that have to do with movies and horror movies, I picked up Flickr by Theodore Rosvac, which my copy's a little beat up because I bought a used copy, but this has been on my TBR forever, and I finally got a copy of this book. This one also has to do with movies. This one's a little bit different though. This kind of sounds a little bit like Night Film, and Night Film is one of my favorite thrillers of all time. I just love that book. I could read it over and over again. And this one focuses more on a guy trying to solve this mystery of this director that disappears. This director was working on this really dark and disturbing noir film. It was supposed to be one of the most disturbing films ever, and he disappears and he leaves clues behind in the movie, and it just goes from there. But I've heard that film buffs will like this book, and even though I don't really talk about movies on my channel too much, I do love movies a lot as well. I just happen to read a little bit more than I watch movies, but I love movies too, and especially books that have movies in them and they talk about film. And of course, especially like dark films. Horror films are my number one thing. I just love them so much, so I'm looking forward to this, and hopefully it's kind of like Night Film, but different enough too, and I think it will be because this one actually came out before Night Film did. Next up, we have The Montauk Monster by Hunter Shea. I read Creature a few months ago, really enjoyed it, and I've been itching to read another Hunter Shea book since then. And this is going to be a creature feature, and that's what he's known for. And this one deals with this town of Montauk and disappearances, monster, showing up, I think, just on the beach. Yeah. On the beach, and there's also a virus, and CDC has to come in, and all hell breaks loose. I don't want to know too much more about it. It's just going to be a fun creature feature, and since it's approaching summertime, I think this will be a fun summer read. Next one is The Changeling by Victor LaValle. So, Victor LaValle wrote The Ballad of Black Tom. I read that back in January, really liked it. It's a novella and it's very Lovecraftian. And this book, it's kind of a horror book, but it also has other elements to it. I've heard it compared to almost like a dark fairy tale. And this is essentially a man whose father had disappeared, and years later he gets married and has a child with this woman, and all of a sudden this woman starts to go kind of bonkers, and he's suspecting maybe postpartum depression, but then she commits an act of violence, and then all of a sudden she's gone and she takes the baby with her, and now the man, his name is Apollo, he has to track down his wife and child and just figure out what is going on. So I've heard really good things about this, and a dark fairy tale sounds awesome. I enjoy that, and like dark fantasy elements, and of course horror. And I think, if I remember correctly, the one review I read about this said it also has to do with social media, and it's sort of a social commentary book as well. So looking forward to this, and I also think the cover is very pretty. Next one, we have Gateways to Abomination by Matthew M. Bartlett. So this one is a short story collection, but all the short stories have to tie into this sort of bizarre, possibly haunted radio station in this small town of Leeds, Massachusetts. I really like when short stories are kind of their own story, but then they tie into one bigger story, and most of my favorite short story collections are by the same author. So like when an author releases a short story collection that's all their stories, I tend to really like that, and I just think this is awesome because radio stations just, oh, it sounds so cool. So I don't know too much about it, and you know what, I'm just going to kind of go into it not knowing much more about it. I don't think I need to really know much more, just that I think some of the stories are like folk horror, some are demonic, some are ghost stories, but it's just going to be kind of a mix, but I've just heard some pretty good things about this. Next up we have Remains by Andrew Cole. So this one, I really enjoy when horror takes subjects like grief and explores them. I really enjoyed The Fisherman and Pet Sematary. Those are two examples of just books that really explore that aspect, and this one I think is going to try to do that as well. So this one is following a woman. She lost her son and she ends up spending time in an institution. She's just ravaged with grief. And then at some point she gets out and she goes to this house where her son had died in, and there's actually a potential opportunity for her to see her son again. And that's pretty much all the back says, and I'm looking forward to it. I've heard this one is a hard-hitting story. I've heard that it can be pretty emotional and maybe even pretty sad, so we'll see how it is, but I'm always up for a good haunted house story, and I'm looking forward to this. And I've also haven't read anything by this author before, so I'm looking forward to it. Alright, next one is this book called Coyote Songs by Gabino Iglesias. Which, look at this awesome cover. So this takes place like on the border, the US and Mexican border, and from what I've gathered, it has to do with like drug trafficking, and there's just a lot going on in this story. In fact, I'll just read the back. It'll sum it up better than I will, I think. In Gabino Iglesias' second novel, ghosts and old gods guide the hands of those caught up in a violent struggle to save the soul of the American Southwest. A man tasked with shuttling children over the border believes the Virgin Mary is guiding him towards final justice. A woman offers colonizer blood to the mother of chaos. A boy joins corpse destroyers to seek vengeance for the death of his father. These stories intertwine with those of a vengeful spirit and a hungry creature to paint a timely, compelling, pulpy portrait of revenge, family, and hope. So, I'm looking forward to this. Haven't heard too much about it, but it just sounds really intriguing, so I can't wait to get to this one. Next up we have In the Valley of the Sun by Andy Davidson. So even though I didn't necessarily care for The Boatman's Daughter that much, I read it last month. It wasn't bad, but there was this disconnect with the characters and myself that I don't know why. It was just hard to explain. But I liked the writing, I loved the writing. It was beautiful, and the descriptions and the setting were awesome. So I want to give the author another shot. And this one takes place also in I think it's in the Southwest / a western town, and it has to do with vampires. So I think what's happening is that, actually it's in Texas, sorry, in West Texas, and there is basically a vampire and I think a Texas Ranger who's going to be going after him, but it's a lot more complicated than that, and I don't know, I'm not going to read too much into it. I just kind of want to go into it not knowing a whole lot, but I really like vampires, as long as they're monstrous vampires, and that's what this book looks like it's going to be about. So as long as it's not like romantic vampires or Twilight vampires, then I do think vampires are really, really fun, and especially vampires in Texas. I think it'll be cool. Alright, next one. We have Things in Jars by Just Kid. So this one's a little bit different than some of the other books on this list because it's not a horror, but it is a mystery with some supernatural, paranormal, and fantastical elements. I think it's been described as a magical realism story. We are following a detective in this book, a female detective in Victorian England, and she is trying to solve the mystery, I believe, of a missing child. Yes, the secret daughter of Sir Edmund Ethelstan Berwick, a peculiar child whose reputed powers have captured the unwanted attention of collectors in this age of discovery. So there's a lot of fun different characters. We have a tattooed covered ghost, an avuncular apothecary, a 7-foot-tall housemaid. Ooh, anyway, so there's a lot going on in this story, and as much as I love horror and thriller, sometimes it's nice to have a fun little magical realism book, and I think this has to also do with mermaids somehow. That's what I saw somebody shelve it on Goodreads under mermaids. which makes sense. There is a mermaid on the back, so I don't know too much about this, but I've heard some pretty good things about it, and I kind of wanted to have something a little bit different, and this is also historical fiction, and I'm looking forward to it. Alright, next one is The Delicate Dependency by Michael Talbot. This one is a reprint of a book that came out in 1982. Thank goodness Valancourt Books. They have been reprinting all kinds of awesome horror books that otherwise would have fallen into obscurity. And I'm really happy because for a while, I've wanted to read this book for many years, and it was just really difficult for me to get a copy of. I just couldn't track one down. And this one is also another vampire novel. This is following a doctor who ends up almost hitting this boy, and this boy can't go out in the sunlight, and he's a very peculiar person. This boy ends up abducting the doctor's child, and so the doctor has to go track down his child, and he brings along like his sister and some other people for the ride, while also trying to figure out vampirism and also solve this mystery of why there's this deadly disease going on. Is it related to vampires? What's up? And I've heard it's supposed to be a really solid, well done vampire novel, and it's one that I've had on my TBR for many years, so I'm finally excited to be getting to it. And also, you see that? It's a bat, but it could also be something else. It's kind of a funny shape, but anyway, looking forward to this. Next up, we have The Pilo Family Circus by Will Elliott. This one I've heard so many things about. A lot of people on BookTube who are in the horror community, at least a couple of the people I follow, love this book. And on Goodreads, a lot of people have been giving it high reviews, and this has also been on my TBR for quite some time. I just haven't picked it up, I think, because I have to be in the mood for a killer clown story, with the exception of It, but that's just because it is Stephen King's one of his masterpieces. But I was like putting off reading this for a little bit, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I actually really, really want to read it. So pick this up. I think this may end up being a series, or there may be a companion novel to it, but for now I'm just going to check out the first book, and I'm just going to read the back of it because I think it'll summarize it a little bit better than I would. You have 2 days to pass your audition. You better pass it, feller. You're joining the circus. Ain't that the best news you ever got? Delivered by a trio of psychotic clowns, this ultimatum plunges Jamie into the horrific alternate universe of the Pilo Family Circus, a borderline world between hell and earth from which humankind's greatest tragedies have been perpetuated. Yet, in this place, peopled by the gruesome, grotesque, and monstrous, where violence and savagery are the norm, Jamie finds that his worst enemy is himself. When he applies the white face paint, he is transformed into JJ, the most vicious clown of all, and JJ wants Jamie dead. Wow. I think it's going to be fun. Heard great things about it, so I'm hoping to get to it soon. Alright, next book. This is one of the books I did not buy. I've had this in my library stack, and I kind of forgot about it. I need to get back into it. And that's The Deep by Nick Cutter. So, I love The Troop. I was very impressed with The Troop. It was one of my favorite books of 2019. And the other book, Lost Heaven, was also pretty good by Nick Cutter, but Troop was fantastic. And this one I've heard is supposed to be especially creepy, and it takes place at the bottom of the ocean, and there's some weird things going on. There may be a slightly apocalyptic elements to this, and yeah, basically there's a plague going on, so that'll be interesting to read right now. And yeah, they're all the way down the Mariana Trench trying to solve this mystery of this plague with this stuff that they find at the bottom. But when you play with unknown, potentially alien life, bad things happen. So I'm looking forward to this. I think it should be a pretty enjoyable one. And yeah, I've been pretty impressed with Nick Cutter so far. So looking forward to it. Alright, next book we have is Ice Massacre by Tiana Warner. So this one has to do with killer mermaids. I haven't read a Killer Mermaid book in a while. The last one I read was Into the Drowning Deep by Myra Grant. I really enjoyed that a lot. I know some people had some issues with it, but for me, I thought it was really enjoyable. And I didn't realize, but I've been craving for another Killer Mermaid book because I read Into the Drowning Deep like many I think like 2 or 3 summers ago at this point. Like the summer it came out, I read it. And this one has to do with this fictional country that's supposed to be kind of off the coast of the United States and Canada, and it's called Kwai. And this country, they can't really do a lot of trade or escape from this country because they are surrounded by killer mermaids, and for many years they've been sending out boys and men to try to battle these mermaids and kill them, because these mermaids are killers and just do mass slaughter and they won't let ships go past. So far they haven't had any success, so this year they decide, why don't we send women? They hopefully will be able to resist the charms of these killer, monstrous, demonic mermaids. So they have these girls that they've been training them since they were 13 years old. They're 18 now, and it's off on their mission to go kill these mermaids. And then they go off, and it sounds really fun. And I don't know if this is a young adult book or not. I don't think it matters either way. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I know this is part of a series, so I'm interested to see how this goes. I haven't heard anything about the other books, but I have heard that this is a really solid start to the book, and I'm hoping that there's definitely a lot of action and monstrous mermaids. So, looking forward to this. Alright, only a few books left. Another book I picked up, Grind Your Bones to Dust by Nicholas Day, which, by the way, look at that fantastic cover. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Rust Maidens, like the style and the color. I just think it's really neat. So this one, I'm just going to read the back because I think it summarizes it a little bit better, but it's a novel, it's not a short story collection. When I first picked it up, for some reason I thought it was a short story collection, but it's actually a novel. Let's see. In his first novel, This Is Horror, and Wonderland Award-nominated author Nicholas Day invites you to take a journey into a hell that is at once uncomfortably familiar, yet unlike anything you've ever encountered before. A surveyor finds himself pursued by flesh-eating donkeys in the furthest reaches of Oregon's desert. A mass murderer leaves the sanctity of his mountain home to pursue a long-lost love. His guide, an otherworldly raven possessed by 19th century American humorist. In nearby Klamath Falls, two strange childhood friends set off to find a missing father with the help of two aging cowboys, and a prisoner in her own home sees a vision of death and knows there is no escape. Pain is proselytizing. Death is the one true faith, and everyone worships in their due time. Sounds awesome, and I like that it's set in Oregon because I live in Washington, and Oregon is like my sister state. And one other thing I want to point out is the fact that there is a dedication. Alright, I'm going to show you this dedication. I hope you can see that. The dedication says, "This book is dedicated to those who would reduce this world to a massive grave and create a hell for the living. I hate you." I've never seen a dedication before that was like a screw you, basically. So I thought that was very interesting, and can't wait to read this. And this is my first Nicholas Day story, so looking forward to it. Alright, this one. I'm like slightly almost ashamed to show this because I have no excuse for not having read this. I don't. And it's Doom and Key by Stephen King. I have not gotten to this book, and I've owned this copy for many years, so this is the other book that I haven't purchased. And I want to read it so badly. It sounds really awesome, and I have read the vast majority of Stephen King's work, but this one just, for whatever reason, kept slipping through the cracks, and I'm finally going to get to it. This one, it really sounds super cool. It has to do with this gentleman who, after he goes through his horrific accident and then goes through a divorce, he ends up living on a beach, taking some time to heal, and he starts drawing, and from there, I believe, yeah, he ends up on Doom and Key, and I think there's maybe something that has to do with his drawings. I actually don't know too much about Doom and Key. It's one of the few Stephen King books that has just kind of slipped through my fingers, but I think that concept sounds really neat, and the fact that it takes place on a beach and has to do with a character healing and connecting with somebody else, I think sounds really cool, and I am looking forward to it, and I can finally be like, yes, I've read Doom and Key, so this is definitely one I am for sure going to be reading this month. I'm making myself, well, I mean, I am interested in it, so it's not like I'm not interested in it. I'm just going to just sit down, though, and be like, do it. No excuse. I've had this book for many years, and it's been on my TBR for like 10 years, so I'm doing it. Alright, only a couple more books left. This is a fantasy novel. It's Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. This one, I haven't I mean, I know it's really popular and a lot of people really talked about it, and I just kind of stumbled upon it. I'm like, oh, you know, I'll give it a chance because I think there's a series that's going to come out, and I just felt like I want to read it because a lot of people really like it. I've heard mixed things about the second book though, so I'm like a little nervous to start a potentially series that goes downhill. But anyway, this one has to do with, I'm actually just going to read the inside flap for you guys. Zili Adebola remembers when the soil of Farisha hummed with magic. Burners ignited flames, Tiders beckoned waves, and Zeli's Reaper mother summoned forth souls. But everything changed once magic disappeared. I almost want to say, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Under the orders of a ruthless king, the Magi were targeted and killed, leaving Zeli without a mother and her people without hope. Now Zeli has one chance to bring back magic and strike against the monarchy. With the help of a rogue princess, Zeli must outwit and outrun the crown prince, who is hell-bent on eradicating magic for good. Danger lurks in Arisha, where snow leopards prowl and vengeful spirits wait in the waters. Yet the greatest threat may be Zeli herself as she struggles to control her powers and her growing feelings for an enemy. So, looking forward to this. I think it should be fun, and it also has a West African culture theme to it, so I haven't really read a book like that, and I'm always looking for fresh fantasy, so I think that'll be really fun and a cool treat. Alright, last but not least, I want to talk about the 3 books that I ended up getting by the same author, which is Jinji Ito. So, I ended up picking up Shiver, Smashed, and Fragments of Horror. So, Jinji Ito, I really enjoy his work a lot. Uzumaki was just very downright creepy and trippy, and it's my favorite of his, but I've read the bulk of his novels, or, you know, not his short story collections, but the actual books, and really liked him. Uzumaki was my favorite. And then the, I think it was the Enigma at Amigahara Fault. That short story was so creepy. Stuck with me to this very day. Every time I think about it, I don't know what it is, but just the concept of that just really creeped me out. And of course his drawings, his artwork is just what really makes the stories. They're downright creepy. And this is my first time really getting into a short story collection, so I just kind of want to binge all of these and see which one is my favorite. And I think this one, Shiver, I was told that if you have trypophobia, so that like weird reaction to things with lots of tiny little holes in it, there's a story in this that's really going to bother people with trypophobia. I used to have that. I tried to desensitize myself to it a long time ago, but we'll see if I still am sensitive to it when I read this story. So I'm looking forward to all of these, and you know, cool covers and awesome artwork. I know either way I'm gonna enjoy myself when I read them, so I'm really happy that I purchased these books and they can go and join my Jinji Ito collection. So anyway, those are all the books that I purchased for the month of June and the books that I plan on reading in June. I might not get to every single one of them, so anything that I don't get to in June is just going to carry over into July. But thank you so much for watching this video. Sorry it took a little bit of time, but hopefully you enjoyed it. I always like watching book hauls and TBR videos and all of that, so I hope you guys like it as well. And let me know if any of these books you're interested in, and if there are any books that you want me to do a review on, I'll try to go ahead and do that. And especially since my job is almost wrapped up for the summer, I'll have a little bit more time to make some more videos. So stay tuned for that, and I will talk to you guys later. Have a great night and happy reading. Bye.